Hey friends, welcome back to the Money Girl podcast. This is Finance Friday, a special edition of Money Girl, where I answer your burning money questions. Anything that's on your mind, I would love to answer it here. Today, we have a topic from an email that came in from Heather, who says, I work for a nonprofit and contribute 4% to my 403B retirement plan, but I'm also trying to get out of debt. Should I stop making retirement contributions so I can send more to my debt? Or just continue investing the same amount, knowing it will take me longer to get out of debt? Thanks for the great question, Heather. I think knowing how to prioritize saving and eliminating debt is a classic financial dilemma. It can be pretty tricky to figure out. This podcast will give you a 4-step priority plan to follow anytime you're unsure how to manage or allocate money. Following this guide will give you confidence that you're using your precious financial resources wisely to balance debt payoff with long-term wealth building. This is episode 993, and I really appreciate you downloading this show. If you're new here, I'm Laura Adams, an award-winning author, money speaker, and founder of The Money Stack. That's my Substack newsletter and community. To learn more and sign up, visit lauradadams.com. And if you have a money question, as I mentioned, I'd love to feature it on a future Finance Friday show. You can leave me a voicemail at 302-364-0308 or send me an email using my contact page at lauradadams.com. All right, let's talk about this 4-step priority plan. I think knowing the best way to manage money can be tricky because there really isn't always a right or wrong answer. Yes, eliminating high-interest debt is always wise. That's always a good move. But you also need to invest for your future, and you also need to maintain a healthy emergency fund and maybe achieve some other short-term goals that are on your list. When you're unsure what to prioritize in your financial life, I think it can lead you into just doing nothing. Feeling like you don't have a plan often leads to just some type of paralysis. So instead, use this plan. Number 1, check your employer matching. So the very first step for Heather or anyone participating in a workplace retirement plan like a 401k or 403b is to know if you're eligible for employer matching. This is so important because a retirement plan match is when your employer contributes to your retirement plan based on how much you put in. Basically, it's free money. And while employers that offer a retirement plan are not required to contribute matching funds, many do because it's a really valuable benefit and it helps them attract and retain good employees. I think it's a great way to encourage eligible workers to participate. So companies that do match will choose to pay either a partial or a full retirement match. So let me explain that. With a partial match, your employer matches a portion of the amount that you put into your account up to a limit. So for example, a partial matching example would be receiving 50% of your contributions, let's say up to 6% of your salary. So if you earn $100,000 annually, 6% of your salary is $6,000. If you contribute at least $6,000 over the year, your employer will match 50% of that or contribute $3,000 on your behalf. So to get the maximum match in this example, you would have to contribute at least 6% of your salary. Now, with a full match, your employer matches 100% of your retirement contributions up to a limit. For instance, you might receive 100% up to 4% of your salary. So if you earn $100,000, your maximum match would be 4% or $4,000. Now, Heather didn't mention the details of her income or her match, but let's assume that she's eligible for a full match. And, she just decides to stop contributing. In that case, she would miss out on receiving 4% of her income from her employer. Since matching contributions are free, they give you an immediate return on your investment. So I don't recommend turning down a match ever because it's almost like agreeing to a pay cut. If Heather pauses retirement contributions to pay off a credit card with let's say, a 20% interest rate, yes, she would save 20% interest on an after-tax basis. But by skipping the employer matching, she loses out on a minimum guaranteed gain of 100%. Plus, the potential investment growth of matching funds could put tens or even hundreds of thousands of additional dollars in your retirement account over the long run, just depending on how much time it has to grow. So even if you have high interest debt, always contribute enough to a workplace retirement plan to max out any free matching funds. If your employer doesn't offer a retirement plan or, does offer one, but it doesn't have any matching, I recommend following the next steps. So we'll move on to number 2, which is to review your emergency savings. Before aggressively paying down debt, Heather needs an ample emergency fund. It's also called a cash reserve or a cash cushion. So the next step in prioritizing your finances is to review and evaluate the health of your savings. Ask yourself, how much is my cash reserve? Does the amount I have make me feel safe, or do I need a larger cash cushion? And is my cash earning interest in an FDIC-insured savings account? Many people have some savings, but they actually need more. To me, an emergency fund is like buying insurance that will keep you financially safe and reduce stress in the future. The right amount of emergency money protects you from a potential hardship, like a job loss or a sudden downturn in your business income. Having savings can be the difference between surviving a hardship and getting buried under it and going further into debt. Therefore, building your cash reserve may be more important than aggressively paying down debt or investing. The amount of emergency savings you need depends on your lifestyle and your work situation. For instance, if you work in an unstable industry, you're self-employed, or you're the sole breadwinner for a large family, you need a larger financial cushion than a single person with no dependents and plenty of job opportunities. A quote-unquote large cash reserve could be at least 3 to 6 months worth of your living expenses, and a small one could be a month or 2. You're really the only person who can gauge the amount that's right for your situation. Another good rule of thumb that you might consider is setting aside a percentage of your annual gross income, like 10%. For example, if you earn $60,000, maintaining a $6,000 emergency fund is a terrific goal. However, if you're starting with zero savings, you could begin with a small goal, like saving 1 or 2% of your monthly income. Then increase it annually until you've got enough to help you manage the stress of a potential hardship. In addition to the amount you keep in cash, where you keep that money is important too. A common mistake is treating your retirement investments as an emergency fund. Instead, keep your cash reserve in a separate high-yield savings account that's FDIC insured. And don't worry if it isn't earning a high interest rate, because that's not the purpose of this particular bucket of money. The purpose of emergency savings is to be accessible and for it to never lose value. Remember that investments always rise and fall in value in the short term, but they can experience significant growth over the long term. Therefore, if you invest emergency money, its value could drop the moment you desperately need to cash it out. So if you or Heather don't have enough savings in the bank for an unexpected financial crisis, that should be a top priority. One way to make saving easier is to automate it. For instance, you could ask an employer to direct deposit a portion of your paycheck into a dedicated savings account, or you could set up a recurring transfer from checking to savings weekly or monthly. If you try to accomplish other financial goals, like eliminating debt, before you accumulate a cash reserve, you could end up back in debt. So evaluate how much emergency savings you have, how much you need, and automate a plan to slowly bridge the gap. Okay, step number 3, attack dangerous debts. After maxing out any employer matching at work and building some emergency savings, your next financial priority is attacking dangerous debts. So these are things like tax liens, overdue child support, or accounts in collection. If you have any of these types of debt, you need to get caught up as quickly as possible. Dangerous debts also include high-interest credit accounts. It could be something like a payday loan, credit cards, and car loans with rates in the double digits, sometimes even in the triple digits. These accounts can destroy your financial health by draining your resources and keeping you from using your money to save or invest. In general, it's best to tackle your highest rate debt first because it costs you the most in interest. Don't worry yet about paying off low interest debts like mortgages or student loans ahead of schedule because they're relatively inexpensive. Additionally, they come with built-in tax deductions, which further reduces their cost. Now, Heather didn't mention the amounts or the interest rates of her debt, so I would encourage her to create a debt payoff spreadsheet and list each account's balance, its interest rate, and the payoff date for any loans. Then you want to sort those from the highest to lowest interest rate and attack them in that order. This is a strategy known as the debt avalanche. However, if you have a small debt that is not your highest interest rate, there's nothing wrong with wiping that one out first. That can feel great, especially if it has a high monthly payment. Another popular payoff strategy is called the debt snowball. This is where you aggressively pay debts from the smallest to largest balance, no matter their interest rate. While it doesn't save the most money, getting rid of a small balance can boost your motivation to keep paying down your debt. And in my opinion, any debt payoff method that you can stick with is a win. And step number 4, analyze low-interest debt. Once Heather eliminates dangerous or high-interest debt, she'll likely have some low-interest balances remaining, like a mortgage or student loans. This is where you must do your best to compare the after-tax interest rates to your potential investment returns. That's because you may be eligible to deduct some or all of the interest paid on those types of debt. For example, if you have a federal or private student loan that charges 6%, you can generally deduct up to $2,500 in interest paid with certain income limits, even if you don't itemize deductions. So that could effectively cut your after-tax interest rate from 6% down to 5% or maybe 5.5%, just depending on your balance. The question you must ask yourself is whether you'd prefer to save approximately 5% by paying off your student loan early or investing it for retirement. The S&P 500 has historically returned 7% over the long term, even when adjusted for inflation. So your choice is whether to have a guaranteed return and eliminate the debt, or have a higher expected return from investing. My recommendation, and what I would do personally, is to invest in a diversified portfolio, such as an S&P 500 index fund, instead of paying off low-rate tax-deductible debt ahead of schedule. However, I'll admit, money is not just about math. It's also about psychology. While the math tells me to invest, you may strongly prefer to eliminate debt, and that's okay. The best choice for you depends on your risk tolerance and your personal feelings about debt. Remember that student loans and home-related debt like mortgages, home equity loans, and home equity lines of credit, or HELOCs, are tax-deductible, making them cost less than the interest rate on their face. Your goal should be to figure out what's more profitable, saving the interest you're currently paying, or investing with the expectation of a reasonable return. Paying off a high-rate credit card is always a smarter move than investing. But I don't recommend rushing to pay off low-rate, tax-deductible debt early. Unless your finances are in great shape, with plenty of emergency money and regular retirement contributions of at least 10 to 15% of your income, make low-rate debt one of your last financial priorities. You shouldn't put your creditor's best interest ahead of your own. Not saving for retirement is just too risky. If you're like Heather and have a retirement plan at work, you can contribute up to $24,500 for 2026. And if you're over 50, you qualify for catch-up contributions that give you a total of $33,500 or up to $35,750 in super catch-ups if you're age 60, 61, 62, or 63. And if you don't have a workplace plan, anyone with earned income can have an IRA. For 2026, you can contribute up to $7,500 or $8,600 if you're over 50. And if you're self-employed, you've got more retirement account options, including a SEP IRA or a solo 401k. Heather, I hope this has been helpful. I want to thank you again for a great question. That's all for now. I'll talk to you soon. Until then, here's to living a richer life. Money Girl is a quick and dirty tips podcast, and we've got a great team working on the show. Steve Rickyberg, audio engineers. Holly Hutchins is our director of podcast. Morgan Christensen is our advertising operations specialist. Rebecca Sebastian is our marketing and publicity manager. Nathaniel Hoops is our marketing contractor. And a special welcome to Maram El Naguib, our new podcast associate.